In our previous videos, we went over the different versions of idealism, as well as the idealist view of the relationship between the internal and external world. In this video, I'm going to go over an important aspect of idealist metaphysics, which is about the nature of our perceptions. Let's begin. Perceptions are the way that we interact with the external world. Our perceptions include the 5 major senses: taste, sound, smell, touch, and sight. Now, to be clear, there are many different views on the nature of perception. The first of these views is direct realism. According to direct realism, our senses do actually perceive what is going on in the outside world. So, when we see a color, there really are those sensational properties. The second view would be indirect realism or representationalism. According to this view, what we directly encounter in a perception is really just an idea that is formed in the mind and not in the object itself. There are objects in the real world, and these objects will give signals to our brain, which then our brain will translate into a mental event. We apprehend the world as if it is represented to us indirectly through the senses that are formulated from the sense data. We do not experience things in and of themselves, but we experience a representation of them. The third view is phenomenalism or anti-realism. According to this view, perception is a phenomena of the mind which is not necessarily connected to the world itself. Phenomenologists and anti-realists do not deny the existence of the external world. However, perception is not caused directly by external objects outside the mind, but rather perception itself has to do with data drawn from the senses and the internal mental processes, such that knowledge is a mental construct of the individual mind. Now, an idealist can hold to each one of these views depending on the version of idealism one holds to. A subjective idealist, for example, may hold to anti-realism, where perceptions are just formed in the mind, and that we do not see objects as they actually are. But an objective idealist can hold to either direct realism or representationalism. On an idealist representationalism, the world that we see is part of our subjective experiences, but there is a corresponding reality that itself is experience. So while we do not directly see reality as it really is, there is still a correspondence between the objective mental world that exists beyond our perceptions and our private mental world from which we see through the lens of our perceptions. On an idealist direct realism, one could actually hold that we see reality as it truly is. When you see colors or hear sounds, one could say that the objective world is nothing but experiential sensations. This means that physical reality is exactly as it appears to us, in the sense that there are objective sounds, tastes, smells, feelings, and phenomenal sights, and that our experience of that world is not mediated. On idealism, phenomenal states of colors or sounds are all that exist. So, when you experience a color, it is part of the sensational properties that create the mental image of the object. We do not need to refer to anything else. It merely is the color of that phenomenal object. The first-person experience of color, from a purely third-person perspective, would be the awareness of an electromagnetic wave hitting an eye. An agent that is having first-person experience of color manifests from the third person as just an electromagnetic wave. Instead of the electromagnetic wave in the brain state creating the mental experience of color, the mental experience of color creates a third-person perspective of the first-person experience taking place. As an analogy, if we are playing a video game and are in control of the character's motion, the actions of the character create underlying computer code that explain the movements. Similarly, in our physical reality, our actions can create an outside map, which is the biochemical state of the eye and the brain state of one's first-person experiences. We will get more into detail about the relationship between the mind and the brain in the next video, but for now, it's important to keep in mind that in a direct realist view of idealism, the world is just what it appears to us. As Bernardo Kastrup says, According to the mainstream story, the physical world consists of particles and force fields defined in purely mathematical terms. These particles and force fields have only abstract, quantitative properties such as mass, charge, momentum, position in space-time, spin, etc. But they entirely lack intrinsic qualities. The physical world out there, in and of itself, has no smell, tone, taste, color, or texture. Instead, these qualities are supposedly generated by our brain, inside our skull. The red you see exists solely inside your head. Out there were only electromagnetic fields with a certain quantifiable frequency of vibration. The texture you feel exists only inside your head. Out there were only geometric arrangements of molecules. That we attribute color and texture to things out there is merely a projection, a psychological artifact of our cognitive apparatus. All the qualities you perceive around you right now are, or as the story goes, inside your head. Your real skull is beyond everything you perceive, encapsulating your whole experiential world like an invisible eggshell beyond the horizon. However, on Idealism, the physical world is exactly what it seems to be, in the sense that it consists solely of the concrete qualities we experience as physicality, namely, the colors we see, the smells we feel, etc. Therefore, the physical world exists entirely within our mind, but not within our head. Our body is itself part of the physical world, so it is our body that is in our mind, not the other way around. Does this mean that all of reality is our private dream? That would only follow if the physical world were all there is. But we know that in addition to the qualities of perception, that is colors, taste, smell, etc., there are other mental categories, such as thoughts and feelings. So even if all perceptions are fundamentally private, we may still be immersed in a shared environment constituted by transpersonal thoughts and feelings. And, as we went over in our previous video, the external world is made of transpersonal thoughts and feelings. So, we are able to account for an objective world. Now, within objective idealism, there are two distinct views about the irreducibility of perceptions. If one holds that perceptions are irreducible, then this would be a dual aspect idealism, wherein intrinsic views and extrinsic appearances are irreducible to one another. But one could also hold that our perceptions are reducible to the experiences of universal consciousness that impinge on the mind from the outside. This means that our perceptions are reducible to transpersonal consciousness. On the reductionist view, our perceptions do not reflect the qualities of experiences of universal consciousness that surround us. We evolved to see experiences that help us to survive, and the qualities of perception experienced by us are just comprised coded representations of how surrounding thoughts of universal consciousness actually feel. This allows one to hold to a strong form of direct realism while still allowing for people to have unique experiences, such as those who are colorblind or can't hear. So, this is the idealist view of perceptions. With our scientific advances, we came to believe colors were somehow emergent features of a physical environment, and we believe we were forced to accept physicalist models to explain the nature of colors. This created an epistemic gap. How could a brain state, or an electromagnetic wave, bouncing off an object and hitting the eye, be what colors emerge from or are equated with? With idealism, we can avoid this problem by saying that the sensations we experience in our perception are actually part of the physical world. On idealism, the world has those qualities, such as sounds, taste, colors, touch, and not just quantities. And so, in our next video, we shall go over the relationship between mind and brain.